Good morning. This is the Saturday morning interview. My name is Geoffrey Onditi. President Uhuru Kenyatta on Friday demanded a total ban on trade in ivory to end trafficking and prevent the extinction of elephants in the world. Africa is home to between 450,000 and 500,000 elephants, but approximately 35,000 are killed every year in the continent to satisfy demand for ivory in Asia, where raw tusks are in high demand. Today, a bonfire will be lit at the Nairobi National Park to ban elephant ivory and rhino horn acquired from illegal poaching. The bonfire will be the largest ever touching of ivory, 105 tons from thousands of dead elephants. Another 1.3 tons of rhino horn will also be banned. One of the key stakeholders in the fight against illegal poaching in Africa is the African Wildlife Foundation, AWF. AWF is partnering with communities to empower them in order to ensure sustainability in terms of fighting poaching and minimizing human-wildlife conflict. Today on the Saturday morning interview, I'm speaking with Kaddu Sebunya, the president, African Wildlife Foundation. We are focusing on the steps in fighting illegal poaching in Africa. What do you think? Is Africa on the right track in fighting illegal poaching? You can share your comments on our KBC English Service Facebook fan page. Welcome to the studio, Kaddu Sebunya.
Thank you, and nice to have you here.
Kaddu Sebunya, when we talk about the African Wildlife Foundation, what do you do exactly?
African Wildlife Foundation, known as AWF at times, is we are the oldest conservation organization on the continent, Africa, founded in the 60s, at the time when African governments were gaining independence. And at that time, it was really looking at building capacity of Africans to manage wildlife and wildlands.
Since that time, what have you done as the AWF? What are you proud of since the 60s up to now? It's more than 50 years, I think.
It's more than 50 years, and we are so proud, and mostly we are so proud with the partnerships we've created with the African governments. We've been working for the last 50 years closely with African governments, right starting from the demarcation of protected areas, developing management plans for protected areas, building capacities of civil servants to manage these protected areas, and then building businesses, especially tourism. We pioneered the idea of community participation in protected area management in the 80s. But again, we also expanded the bar, raised the bar in terms of community engagement and direct benefits from wildlife in terms of businesses from tourism.
And you have a very important function, the banning of ivory on the 30th, that is Saturday. What really is the significance of this ban here?
First of all, I just want to start by congratulating the government of Kenya for the decision they've taken on banning ivory this morning and this today. And it's a very, very, very important and clear message Kenya is sending to the rest of the world, to the continent, Africa. Kenya is one of the leading countries in Africa, and we are under crisis when it comes to trafficking. We are losing almost 35,000 elephants annually on the continent. The rhinos, many countries in Africa have lost their rhino populations. So for Kenya to make this decision of banning ivory, it's a very, very clear message to the rest of the world that ivory belongs to live elephants and live rhinos. It doesn't belong to any storage.
You're talking about 35,000 elephants being killed annually. That is a huge number. What is really happening?
Most of it is really poaching. People kill elephants for this illegal trade in ivory. Of course, there's natural death as well, but majority of the death of elephants is through poaching and for ivory. And not meat, but ivory.
Talking about 35,000, that is a very huge number in Africa. What are some of the challenges that have led into this number increasing all the time?
There are a number of issues arising out of this. One is really management of protected areas. Two is the globalization of trade. So the cross-boundary trade has increased over time with globalization. Law enforcement, resources we are investing in protected areas. And most important, the benefits and the idea that the communities around the protected areas have to have direct interest in wildlife management and benefits, as well as education.
Yes.
Both at the site where protected areas are, at the trafficking level, and the demanding countries like in Asia and North America.
I'll have to repeat this question because it's very important. When you talk about 35,000 elephants being killed annually in the continent, have the African governments or stakeholders neglected wildlife as a whole?
No, I wouldn't use the word neglect. I mean, there are some countries, in Kenya, actually, the population of elephants is increasing. So are the rhinos. So Kenya government is doing a good job. But we continental-wise, we are under crisis. Governments have tried, but they will need more effort. We need more approaches. We need more strategies. And I'll give you just an example of what African Wildlife Foundation is doing. One of the things is we are focused on supporting the economies around protected areas. One, for communities or people around protected areas to gain through their livelihoods directly from wildlife. And through that, tourism is a very, very good vehicle for that. We're supporting communities to gain stakehold into business. But also, we are doing environmental education. We have a school program we call Classroom Africa, where we build schools in these communities to increase the level of education of communities. We do support businesses, engagement. We do alternative agriculture for communities. Instead of growing watermelon around protected areas, you could run to do avocados. You want to do tea growing around these areas. So bringing market and supporting the value chain of products which are friendly to wildlife is one of the approaches. But also the capacity of governments, law enforcement. We work very closely with KWS, with the Cannon program, where we are placing dogs at the airport to sniff out ivory. So in some of these things have a wider approach beyond site level protected areas.
And that means you're empowering communities.
A very, very big. We are not going to succeed with conservation unless Africans are, when I say Africans, from leadership to the community level, are involved in conservation of our wildlife and wildlands.
You've stated several activities that you're doing as the African Wildlife Foundation. How has this changed the attitude of those communities, especially in terms of preserving the environment and protecting wildlife?
We've seen a number of successes and there are cases, and I've just mentioned that Kenya, we've seen improvement in elephant population, and part of that are the programs KWS is taking on, but also some of the programs AWF are implementing together with the KWS. But one of the examples I'll give is the school program. We're building a school in Congo, in Namibia, in Uganda, in DRC. And these schools, once communities who have over time have seen wildlife as a foreign business interest and tourism as a foreign entity, once they see the conservation engagement in things they really care for, educating their children, health systems, the business, tourism businesses, the engagement. We have community-owned lodges across the continent.
And do they gain from those activities?
They gain from
How exactly,
these lodges.
for example?
An example is the Kanigi Lodge in Rwanda, which are very close to Kenya here. And the people, communities own the land. We've flipped the idea of business development around tourism. Communities own land near the protected areas through our support. Then the communities, that's the equity, and business owners, which are international tour operators and estate owners, they have to apply, write a proposal to the communities for partnership in the lodge.
Who writes the proposal?
It's the business community. So the way the system works, we do support communities to acquire ownership of land near these protected areas. Then they will advertise for partnership for any business partner who would like to be involved in the ownership of the business. Then the businesses will apply and write a proposal to the communities that if I partner with you, we'll build a lodge together. I'll give you so much percent of the equity. You have so much percentage of this equity. This is how much I'll give you per bed night. This is how we share the profit. They receive about 10 proposals and they will choose, with our support and government, they will choose who are the best partners would be. It's almost flipping the coin. Previously, in the 80s, it would be the the private companies owns a concession from governments. They build a lodge, and the communities around this national park, they will come and dance. They will come and wash clothes. They will come and sell crafts. And we thought that was not enough. The communities must have equity in the lodge. They must have ownership in the percentage. And they earn almost $500,000 out of this lodge annually, and they've done a lot of projects. Before the business owners will take the profit, will pay, of course, the national park services of those countries for concession fee and bed night fee, but the communities will not see direct benefits. Here, they own the lodge. The lodge is owned by them.
Sebunya, do you think this is really sustainable?
Absolutely. We've seen a replication of that. There are some examples here in Kenya, the examples in Uganda, the examples in Zambia, the examples in South Africa. It's being replicated. However, the sustainability of the things we are modeling is going to depend on the African leadership having the right policies, showing leadership on these issues, like Kenya is right now with the banning of the ivory. Would like to see more friendly policies on this. Would like to see more investments, budget-wise, percentage of the budget going to protected areas. That is not, we're not seeing that much. Would like to see wildlife and wildlands represented in any discussion in boardrooms across the continent.
This is the Saturday Morning Interview. Today on the Saturday Morning Interview, I'm speaking with Kaddu Sebunya, the President, African Wildlife Foundation. We are focusing on the steps in fighting illegal poaching in Africa. What do you think? Is Africa on the right track in fighting illegal poaching? You can share your comments on our KBC English Service Facebook fan page. Kaddu Sebunya, you are the President, African Wildlife Foundation, but you also understand that different countries have different policies. How do we harmonize then these policies to protect our environment, to protect our wildlife?
Part of my job as President of African Wildlife Foundation, the largest conservation organization on the continent, is to engage African leadership on these issues. As a matter of fact, this week I just came back from a meeting at the AU, engaging the African Union on these issues. Africa has the institutions and the framework to address the issues you are raising.
Yes.
How do we work together? We have the East African Community, we have the COMESA, we have the ECOWAS, we have NEPAD, we have African Union. These kind of institutions have the mandate to bring countries together to deal with the issues beyond countries. And one of the example is wildlife trafficking. A lot of the ivory Kenya is banning is being confiscated as trafficked out of Kenya, but it doesn't come sourced out of Kenya. It's coming from other countries through Kenya to the port of Nairobi to be exported. So we need governments to work together, and the institutions exist to do that. We just need to engage these institutions.
I want you to be very specific, Mr. President. When you're talking about governments working together, what do you mean exactly? How do governments work together?
One of the examples is CITES. CITES is one of the examples of where governments...
CITES?
That is the Convention on International Trade in wildlife trade. It brings governments together to agree on how trade in natural resources would be. The focus really on CITES, a lot of times we think it's about ivory and rhino horn. CITES also covers timber. It covers other seeds. It covers medicinal plants. It covers a lot of things through fauna and flora. But it's a very, very good example of where governments came together, discussed the crisis around wildlife, and agreed that trade in ivory, trade in the rhino horn is illegal. That's an international agreement. And this is signed by governments, not NGOs. That's a very, very good example. And that's why for governments to open up trade, they will go back and negotiate that with other governments and agree on how that works. And we've seen examples where these agreements have worked, where CITES, for example, has agreed with a few countries like Zimbabwe to have a one sale of ivory. And it has has happened. And then after that, they said, okay, we're going to shut it down again and stop that trade.
Yes.
So the mechanism exists.
Despite these agreements that you've mentioned, the ivory trade seems to be going on, especially between Africa and Asian countries. Why?
A big part of that is globalization. Africa never before has it traded with globally as it is now. The increase has been 20% increase in the international trade on the continent. That, of course, comes with a lot of opportunities, but also the downfall is the bad guys using these systems. The other part is the institutions in Africa being weak. The legal system is not as strong as it should be. Some laws don't apply to wildlife trafficking.
The policies that you mentioned.
The policies don't. And I'll tell you what we are doing about it as African Wildlife Foundation in partnership with a couple of other organizations and governments. We have a program which addresses the demand for ivory. It addresses the trafficking of ivory, and it also stops the killing. We say stop the killing, stop the trafficking, and stop the demand. And it addresses all those, the entire value chain. Stop the killing addresses the activities or is the programs we have at site level, and mostly that is around the protected areas, the strengthening of the protected area services, the law enforcement, the ranger posts being built in the improving the communication between rangers. That helps to stop the killing. The community engagement, it helps to stop the killing of this wildlife. Then stop the trafficking. Some of the things we are doing is the Canaan program we are doing with the KWS at the airport. Since January, I think this week we had the 19th case where the dogs have helped to catch somebody trying to smuggle
19
ivory.
cases.
19, yeah.
And that's a huge number.
That's a huge, since January.
January and April.
And today, 19 cases, and these are dogs. You can't bribe a dog. You can't talk to a dog. You can't negotiate with a dog. KWS and the Airport Authority here in Kenya, they've been great partners to us. And we've been able to catch a few things. At the Mombasa port, we have also some Canaans there. They're doing fantastic. But that's not enough, because catching actually the bad guy is the easy part. But processing that person through the courts is the harder one. So we are having a very, very nice program where we are working with the prosecutors in Kenya and across Africa in identifying where the gaps are, in where we can strengthen the law, identify what laws apply, and also making it easy, reference points for prosecutors and judges. And that is all part of stopping the trafficking. But let me just give me a minute to tell you about the demand. We are partnering with the World Aid, another international organization, in China and Vietnam. And there we are increasing the awareness about ivory trade to the consuming community. And the one simple message is that actually ivory has no medicinal, rhino horn has no medicinal properties, as most people think. It's like your fingernail. It's the same as your fingernail. Exactly the same. So the idea that you consume it for medicinal plant is a myth. So educating the people that you are being ripped off is so important. But also educating them and mobilizing them to address their government.
But apart from medicinal values that people believe in, there's also the issue of beauty. They take it for beauty.
They take it for ivory. They take it for beauty. And that's why it's so important today that Kenya is sending a message to those who think there's a lot of things you can use for beauty. Yeah. But so for Kenya sending a message to the rest of the world, the task's beauty is on a live elephant. It's not in your home. It's not in any storage. It's not in any museum anywhere in the world. It should be on an elephant if you want to see the beauty of ivory. And that's why I really recommend Kenya for the message they are sending to the world by banning ivory. And there's so many other messages you can send, but Kenya's position, we fully support it as the African Wildlife Foundation.
Yes, I'll take you back. You mentioned something to do with prosecution of those that are conducting this illegal trade. Why can't we see the conclusion of these cases fully?
Part of this, what we are hearing through some of the workshops we've conducted with the judges and prosecutors and law enforcement, is that actually the laws have been so weak over time. And sometimes they have been overtaken. You are caught with ivory in some countries. You are caught with ivory. Ivory costs, I don't want to go into details of the prices because I'm not here to encourage the market. But it's much more expensive than the fine. Most of these laws, you are fined sometimes equivalent to $100 if you are caught with ivory at the airport. And these guys come ready with a fine.
$100, that is 10,000 shillings.
10,000 shillings
in Kenya.
And they would pay, and they take their flight out of the country. So sometimes, actually, the laws have been very weak. They need to be revised. The fines are very low, and we need to address that. Correction of evidence. The capacity has been very weak. So many times, there's a very interesting case I'm following where some of the smart lawyers for the bad guys are saying you cannot produce evidence corrected through a dog. That a dog identifying a bag with ivory is not submissible to the course of law. And the prosecutors have to be very, very smart to address, because these bad guys hire very, very smart lawyers. So we need...
And they pay them a lot.
They pay them a lot. So we need to strengthen the law. We need to strengthen the policy, how it's applied. We need to build the capacity of collecting evidence at the airports. We need to do a little bit of more investment. I don't have the figures here in Kenya, but in most countries, when you look at the budget investments with natural resource management in our protected areas, it's much lower than most of other development sectors. Yet, we cannot achieve our prosperity dream, our economic dream, if we don't take care of our natural resources. They are part and parcel of our heritage, but most important, they are part and parcel of our development plans.
Yeah, this seems an easy question. When you talk about illegal and legal trade, do we have legal trade in wildlife? We seem to think about illegal trade.
Yeah, there is legal trade. I'll give an example is that some countries allow trade, like in United States, allow trade within their borders. If you've acquired ivory, which has been there for a very long time in your family, you are able to sell it to another person in that state, and that's illegal trade, legal ivory trade.
Yes.
The problem, and that's why it's so important today that Kenya is banning ivory. The problem is you cannot differentiate between the ivory you inherited from your grandfather in 1940s and you want to sell it, which is illegal, from the ivory somebody got from Kenya a month ago having killed an elephant. Once it reaches the market, you cannot differentiate. That's why a lot of us are saying, under this crisis, we must ban the trade until we realize the numbers. Then maybe we can have a discussion on trade in ivory. But right now, we are under crisis. I just told you,
yes.
34,000 elephants are killed annually. We cannot just sit back.
We cannot just sit back.
We cannot just sit. As Africans, these are our resources. They are part of our heritage. We are, as the living Africans now, all we can do is to protect the wildlife for our future generations to also come and enjoy. That's part of our heritage. But most important, they are so important to our economic dream.
So how is it possible that those countries in the East, for example, they very much allow ivory from Kenya when they have mechanisms to stop this trade?
There, and that's part of our program, Stop the Demand. As we engage people from the recipient countries, communities, education, they will engage their governments, and that's changing. And we've seen some movement. China recently just banned crushed ivory out of the agreement with the U.S. government. U.S. government crushed ivory last year in New York. So we are starting to see movement there. Hong Kong is right now discussing when, not if, but when they would ban trade in ivory in Hong Kong.
So they've agreed.
Yes, there is some movement we see, and we just need Africans to get together. And whoever has an opportunity to engage the recipient countries on any business discussion or educational discussion, we need to include the aspects of wildlife and wildlands in any discussion.
Yes, as we are winding up the Saturday morning interview, Kaddu Sebunya, do we really have hope that this illegal trade, especially of ivory, will end?
Absolutely. I mean, if we get more countries like Kenya setting up examples and ownership of this, I see I'm very, very optimistic about this. We've seen since the 80s the population of Kenya is improving. It was not. We've seen Tanzania, which has suffered a lot of loss in the recent years. From last year, they are taking steps to stop that. Just recently, last week, South Africa has just pulled out the request on application to be allowed to trade. We've seen some movement and leadership from different countries in Africa, and I'm very, very optimistic. We've seen, as tourism develops, as we engage in the discussion and raising awareness of what these resources mean to our economic development on the continent. Absolutely. They are going to survive, and Africa will thrive.
Africa will thrive. Thank you very much, Kaddu Sebunya, the President, African Wildlife Foundation. for participating on the Saturday morning interview.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, we come to the end of the Saturday morning interview. Today, our focus has been the fight against illegal poaching and the successes and challenges so far. You can still share your comments on our KBC English Service Facebook fan page about Africa's progress in fighting illegal poaching. My name is Geoffrey Onditi.